What India-Pakistan can teach us about Israel-Palestine. Anti-Zionists say it was a big injustice that in 1948, hundreds of thousands of Arabs ended up having to move a few miles away from where they had been living before. Now put aside for a second that in that general time period, there were many cases where much larger populations were permanently displaced. Muslims forced to move in the Soviet Union, Germans forced to move in Eastern Europe, Greeks, Turks, Chinese, Japanese, war refugees, all forced to move, and no one still talks about those. And put aside for a second that it was the Arabs who started the 1948 war to try to, quote, push the Jews into the sea. And put aside for a second that it was the Arab armies who told the Arabs to leave their homes in Palestine and told them they could return shortly once they cleared out all the Jews, which they failed to do. And put aside for a second that many of the Arabs in Palestine had migrated there recently to take advantage of economic opportunities created by the Zionists who were there before them. And put aside for a second that the term Nakba, or catastrophe, was originally coined to describe how humiliating it was for 5 Arab national armies, plus 2 more irregular Arab armies, to lose a war they started against the lowly Jews. And only later was the Nakba repurposed into a grievance narrative. Put all of that aside, and if you still think that what happened in Palestine in 1948 was the greatest injustice in human history, consider what happened in India in 1947. Because the year before Israel declared independence, Muslims in India had a similar idea. They said, we don't want to be a minority under the Hindus. We want our own state. So they carved out Pakistan. Millions of Hindus and Sikhs were driven out of their ancestral homelands, the cradles of their civilizations, to make way for a Muslim state. Up to 17 million people were displaced in the Indian partition. What happened in Palestine was microscopic compared to that. But no one is trying to undo the Indian partition 8 decades later. People have long since resettled and moved on with their lives, just as people in every single other population displacement in human history have done. Today, India, like Israel, is a multicultural democracy with a large number of Muslims. Pakistan, like the Palestinian-controlled areas, has a tiny, dwindling minority population because they make it so difficult for minorities to survive there.